inclusive economic growth opportunities for our communities. And so we want to know, what does that look like, and who's being excluded from the economy right now, because that's who we want to try to include in the context of this program. So when we look specifically, this is broken up by our subregions, so by our California Jobs First subregions. There's a helpful yellow star by the Sacramento Yolo subregion on each slide. And you can see here that nearly 40% of residents in the Sacramento and Yolo counties belong to families whose income does not cover basic needs. And that's that struggling families category that's highlighted in orange. And so I'll note the bright orange is struggling working families. So that means that these families are working, but still not making a wage that enables self-sufficiency. And then that lighter orange is the struggling non-working families. And a lot of times this corresponds to folks who have retired and things like that. So they're not participating in the employment economy. And then the gray bar is is non-struggling families. Next category, please, or next slide, please. Okay, so on this slide, we see that unfortunately children really make up the largest proportion of individuals in the Sacramento and Yolo counties who are struggling. And so this is the most impacted group of people. And this is, as we think about not only their quality of life now, but how we're building our economy and our communities and our individuals for the future. This is a really important statistic for us to really be thinking about. So we see pretty close to half of the children in Sacramento and Yolo counties belong to struggling families. Next slide, please. So when we look at the demographics and other characteristics of struggling families, we see disparities, and we note that large portions of struggling workers are young, people of color, and when we look at the education level in that mid-skill range. And so to start with age, this makes some sense as you think about people through their career growth of their lifetime, often start at a lower income level and the hope is that there is the opportunity to make a higher wage as you get older. On our race and ethnicity measure, this matches disparities that we see across the nation as a result of long-term inequalities that impact our communities of color disproportionately. We don't see much of an effect on gender, and then in terms of education, there is education is influenced, and I can't even read my categories here. But I will note, it doesn't fix everything, right? If we look at like bachelor's degree and higher, we still see a 20% of those who have a bachelor's degree and higher still are in that struggling category. And so education certainly is an important factor, but it also reflects that there's still some systemic issues going on for those who even have bachelor's degrees. Next slide, please. And this slide is really thinking about this self-sufficiency wage. And when our research partner, Cities and PS, looked at what is a self-sufficiency wage, and this is not exactly reflected on this slide, but I'll get to this in just a second. They looked at a wide range of categories that make up the expenses of people's lives, and that includes housing, healthcare, taxes, childcare, food, and a number of other categories, including emergency savings and retirement savings. And when you put all this together, what we see in our region overall is that there is a relatively high wage that's really required for people to be self-sufficient in this region, and it's far above what we would consider the federal poverty line. When we look at Sacramento and Yolo counties, the self-sufficiency wage would require $30.70 per hour, or about $62,000 a year. And this changes by family type, first of all. And so the more kids you have, the more you need to get by. And having two parents who are working actually requires a higher household wage because you have to factor in childcare at that stage too. And so there's a lot of differentials within the calculation for different family types. But I think the takeaway is that it's a relatively high wage that we're aiming for when we're thinking about helping create pathways to high quality jobs. And I'm not going to try to describe what these lines mean in this chart, but I will say through a process of engagement with regional researchers, with our Brookings institution partners, and with local jurisdictions that have some thresholds already in place around high quality jobs, we've identified the standard of getting half of the Sacramento and Yolo parents to a self-sufficient wage, which is the number that I cited before. So that's kind of a trajectory that we're trying to create by creating high quality jobs that would lift at least half of our region's parents out of poverty. All right, next slide, please. So we've already talked a little bit about what constitutes a quality job, but I want to add to that definition too, because not every job that we create, that we have now, certainly is a quality job, right? That's aspirational, but there's still jobs that don't hit that threshold that are really important, meaningful jobs in people's lives and in our communities and in our economy. So we've also identified as a target creating promising jobs. So quality jobs is kind of our gold standard, but we also are looking to create promising jobs. Promising jobs do not meet all of the standards of the quality job criteria, but they do provide career pathways that will lead most workers into a high quality job within 10 years. So, you know, if you're thinking about that young worker who has an entry-level job, maybe this person is still single and they do not meet the criteria for that high quality job. But the hope is that it's a job that will create a trajectory for them in which they will be able to achieve that. And then the other job categories is the jobs that don't provide that pathway to either a promising or a quality job, don't provide benefits, and don't provide that wage that helps, that creates self-sufficiency for people. Next slide, please. All right, so presently, about 1 in 3 jobs in the Capital Region are considered good jobs. And in the Sacramento and Yolo County, this translates to 37% of jobs are good jobs. So this represents a gap that we have, right? So we really are looking at not just taking other jobs, the things that are not good jobs, and making them good jobs, although that is certainly a piece of the solution, but actually creating more jobs, and really driving strategies that will help create jobs and then help create pathways into those jobs. Next slide, please. I think this is where I'm going to leave you from a data perspective with this, looking back at our sectors again. And again, this is an important lens because I think part of the strength and the challenge of this program is to create really concrete strategies that create jobs. As we look at this list of sectors, it's important to be thinking about how does that translate to specific strategies that will lead to jobs in, you know, within these different economic categories that we have in our region. And so we're going to walk through, you know, as this planning process keeps moving, we're going to be really trying to zero in on what are maybe 3 to 5 industry sectors that we know we want to focus on because we believe that we can create good jobs and pathways into those good jobs within those sectors. And we believe we have a lot of opportunity to grow within them. And so with that, I hope that has given you just a little taste of the research that we have. As I said, there's more to come and there's people who are explaining it better than I am. And we'll send you the resource to that first recording that we have. And we're going to continue to be bringing these research assets to you. Come early 2024, we're going to be releasing all the research that we have, making it available on our website, and then helping provide tools and communications to help people understand what they're looking at. And so this is a mechanism to really create these aids to our decision making in this capacity for our region. So I'll leave it at that, and we're ready for a discussion and breakout session, I believe.
I hope you all can hear me. My name is Mike Butau. In case you don't know, I'm a part of the Everyday Impact Consulting team, partnering with Civic Thread to help facilitate our sub-region. And so we're going to go ahead and break out into, again, two breakout rooms. It's going to be both here virtually, here in the room and also virtual. And so in a moment here, we're actually going to ask to mute the audio for the breakout rooms virtually. And so, in the room, that way they can give instructions, and start the breakouts, and then I'll provide instructions in the room as well. So we'll just give a moment for that. Now we're going to do a brief share out, both in the room as well as virtually. So hopefully you have your selected speaker. Got my handy timer here as well. So we are going to ask folks who are sharing out from your discussion 1 minute to share, again, one big idea from your discussion, and anything else that you want to share. But just to sort of reiterate, I think I was hearing some really great and big ideas. And so to reiterate the outcomes and process here, we really want to start to narrow down what some of these big ideas are into eventually thinking about projects, right, for the region. And at some point, we're going to be working on translating all of these big ideas into, what are those tangible projects that we can really make sure we're providing a competitive proposal for in our region. So with that, I'm going to pass it. We're going to do a share out here in the room first, and then we'll go online. So.
Thank you, So for our breakout group 2, we started with the questions, and the first question was, does the research presented reflect what is happening in your community, and gives a specific why and why not? Said yes, but just from the part of the research we've seen thus far, believe like when we are interacting, especially I work in labor, when we are interacting with individuals, like we can clearly see the issues. And when we dived in just to identify what some of the issues were, childcare, food insecurity, transportation, mental health, housing insecurity. Those are like all the different things that we see that actually like matches directly with the data. And the next question was, what do you believe are the most pressing issues or needs in our community? And all those things are like some of the most pressing issues, and that we basically need to address, and how each thing actually bleeds into the other, right? Like if someone is hungry, like if a child is hungry and they go to school, they're not thinking about school. Like it just doesn't make any sense. Next thing, we talked about what outcome or goals would you like to see achieved through this process. And I think on this one, we talked a lot about the actual process, like knowing what actually goes into the process of getting this from here to the state and then approving something. So that's basically what we talked about for the most part. Well, what will make this initiative a success for you personally or for your organization? But like for me, it's both things, like labor standards across the board is, for me, is one of the most important things. But on a personal level, one of the things that I want to see is the ability to start creating the workforce to start having EV charging stations, because we are moving into electrification. The ability to train that workforce as we starting to go through that process will be great. Someone mentioned that right now there's no one, no company actually who fixes EV charging stations, for an example, right? Like that's something that we would love to be able to bring about as a project, for the simple fact that it creates high level jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Holman. All right, can we hear from our second speaker in the room?
Oh, that'd be me. Hi, Shira with Atrium 916. Is it okay from here? Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna go through quick because we went through a lot and I think a minute is not fair. Okay, so housing prices, they are higher than what the research has shown. We said that small businesses are less reflected in the data. Housing availability, especially subsidized, so we talked a lot about the housing, there's a big issue with housing. Happiness and well-being in employment, we think that that is important. It's not enough just to get a job. You need to be happy and content in that job, to stay in that job and to do a good job. The trades, we talked a lot about the trades, the utility sector, kind of lower barrier to entry. So the utility sector, actually, there's a low barrier of entry because they do good training. Needs, career focus, we talked about that the young people don't have enough career focus, you know, kind of knowing what opportunities are out there, what they can do. This was something that kind of repeated itself. We need to nurture more small businesses, education to prepare for trades. And so this is something that we spoke about, that they're not teaching shop or anything or creativity, things like that in school that will help you get jobs that you don't necessarily need to go to a university or college for. So we were talking about like, how can we bring back more trades and things like that, or maybe after school programming, or a place that they can go and learn how to do welding. And then maybe have internships. We talked about internships at schools. So that way they can go into a job and they can learn, and with that internship also learn the soft skills of being there on time and etiquette. So funding for hands-on learning, that's something that we talked about. Yeah, high school, better exposure to pathway. Sorry, that's one. Yeah, training soft skills, certification program, apprentice. Okay, I did all that. Vocational sustainability jobs. So we talked about, yeah, solar and all that, but we need to talk about waste reduction. That's going to be a big issue that's coming up soon. How can we work on the reuse economy? Second question, improvement to worker life experience. The reality transitioning out of, what is this?
That was about specifically about the ag sector.
Oh, okay, yes. So the agricultural sector here in, thank you. The agriculture sector here in Yolo, there's a lot of ag workers. So transitioning a lot of ag workers out of ag because it's a very low paying job. So helping with them. And then, sorry, Sac County updating. So they're going to use the information for their strategic planning, which is great. And then more empowerment to fight for higher wages. And they want to see more policies and higher wages come out of this. Understanding rights like worker rights, gender gaps and things like that. Intersectionality. So connect the social issues to economic development and racial gender, just connecting that all together. One thing was do something different than the traditional economic development. We're tired of the same old, like, let's not do, okay, see, go do this. Like, how can we do something that's really different, that really presents results? The creative sector, can we improve the creative sector, getting more creatives involved? What is the creative sector? I think a lot of people are not understanding what the creative sector is and how that is part of every sector. And then we spoke about having a place that maybe that they could go and learn a lot of these trades. They can go and learn maybe welding, and this could be a creativity center, a creativity hub that also includes education on sustainability and places to learn. I think that was it.
Perfect, thank you both.
Yeah. That was a lot.
Maybe online, I'm gonna ask Phil or Renee if either of you can share who is gonna be sharing online next.
Yes, I can start with breakout room 1, and it will be Zach Frills with the Central Labor Council.
Good evening, everybody. You know, we talked a lot about, you know, there is a need for nuance in some of the data, particularly to make sure that small business and organizations of all levels are reflected in that data. We also talked a little bit about, or a lot about, pressing issues or needs in our community, and particularly, you know, one of the things we tend to neglect is the way in which the care economy really squeezes us. Many people talk about affordable housing and transit and the need for both of those, which is absolutely true. but also workers tend to be devastated by a care crisis that could really jeopardize particularly low income, single parent families, or low wage workers. And these are both childcare, which I think was amplified greatly during the pandemic and the ability to jumpstart the economy, but also the thing that folks often neglect is in-home healthcare, where folks equally cannot go to work when they have to take care of a sick family member, or as we know with the boomers and the retirement crisis, that there will also be a coming care crisis. And so that's also where we see labor is doing its most organizing, tends to be in places that are reflected in the research. Like the top sectors in growth in the last few years are also high density union sectors, but also that unions continue to organize for home health, childcare workers, affordable housing, and the like. In terms of expectations and goals, we think we need to be clear about an actionable timeline and to make sure relevant stakeholders are at the table, which we're impressed by the number of organizations that are included in this dialogue. But that shovel-ready projects will also have to have workers in those spaces. The folks that will actually have to do that work will also need to be a part of the workforce development process if we're going to be successful in not just attracting those employers, but also having the workforce that can go to work in those spaces. Additionally, we also have to be mindful that folks, if we're going to bring workers into that space, also have to understand that they may not be used to they may not be an executive director of their of a nonprofit or a CEO of a business, but that their perspective matters to the overall process as well.
Thank you so much. All right. Go to you next.
Thank you. So for virtual room 2, Karen Swan's going to be sharing for our group.
All right. So for our understanding community needs, a couple main points were, one, that it's not okay that 50% of our children are living in families that are struggling to make ends meet. We have to do better. So we have to remember that statistic when we are making our plans of how are we addressing that? What's the benefit to the children? Also, one question that really came up was, where is industry at the table? And that it's important for a true point-to-point solution, and we need commitment by to the workforce by employers to have true cross-sector partnerships to move this work forward in an effective and equitable way. We need the employers and industry at the table. And one example was presented of some jobs that could become higher quality jobs is if we have more full-time jobs in the higher education sector, was one specific example that came up. Okay, so for the second one, expectations and goals, we had a very robust conversation about collaboration in our region and how we see a lot of a kind of a scarcity mindset among the partners who are applying for funds that might be preventing us or is preventing us from working together, where we might be more effective to get some of the federal funds, state funds that go to other regions who are already collaborating. And one of the things to note there is that because this lack of coordination, we're missing out on funding, and we need to have community and be a collaboration before the opportunities arise. We need to already have a landscape of collaboration and community among all of the partners so that we can be strategic as a region and not reactive, and be ready for opportunities when they arise, and maybe even influence what opportunities arise if we're already working together and know what our needs are. Just looking at my notes to make sure I didn't miss any main points. So I think those were really our main points in hopefully a minute or less.
All right, thanks so much, everyone. Just a round of applause for our I just want to acknowledge and thank everyone. I know it's not easy to be thinking about these at 7:25 p.m. So really want to make sure that we get you all out of here on time. I think we heard so much, and every time we're in these discussions, we're getting closer and closer to narrowing down what we want to see for our region. So with that, I'm going to bring up Annette to walk through next steps with everyone.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you again to everyone. 5 minutes, that's all I need, I promise. Next slide, please. All right, so thank you, Marla. Karen mentioned where is industry. I told my little subgroup here, because the focus and needs can be different, and sometimes we invite business into these conversations, but they don't come back the second time. We decided to separate the two in the beginning so that we can make sure that everyone in our community is actually heard and has an opportunity to provide meaningful input into the conversations. Doesn't mean you are not welcome at the business convening, but we do have a separate one that's going to be on November 29th from 10 to 11, so during regular business hours for them, where we're going to focus more on the small business conversation. And then our next convening is in January 24th. We also have a business convening that day as well. At some point, we'll bring the two groups together when it's time to start talking about and coming to consensus on our projects that we want to push forward. Next slide, please. Follow-ups and next steps, really important. I'm going to talk about a survey because, you know, if you don't measure it, it didn't happen. But there is compensation available for our community members that might need it. We recognize that you're taking time out of your day and away from your families to be here. So if you decide that you have an interest in compensation, there is a link there as well as a QR code that will give you the details about how to make that happen. Next slide. I'm there. And Catherine, so as Catherine, we are your contacts and connections and leads. If you have follow-up questions, you think of something that we didn't discuss here in the room today, that you want to, as well as, of course, our regional convener, Valley Vision. Thank you all so much. Thank you for managing the logistics for us today. Maritessa, Darlene, and Evan are always amazing. Renee online, thank you so much for all you bring to the conversation. Next slide. Thank you for attending our sub-regional convening. The survey is important, not only to hear kind of how we did, what's missing, what we want to plan for our next session, but these questions that we answered today, they're on the survey as well. So oftentimes in these conversations, you drive away and think, oh, I should have said that one thing. This is your chance to add that one thing into our conversation. So we'll be sending out a link to the notes like we did for the October convening as well. So you'll have that information as well as a copy of the slide deck. And if there's no questions, thank you all for your evening.